Are we good to got the right screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, here we go. As we said earlier, we are talking about strategies to retain our executive director. What we're going to talk about today are just kind of some retention stats, talk about why retention is so important, explain a little bit about why the executive director job is so hard, and then really dig into those 8 strategies. We'll finish up with that Q&A. So let's go ahead and get rolling. Um, According to 2 recent talent surveys for nonprofit organizations, there are some really startling statistics that we need to talk about. The first being that there are only 13% of nonprofits that have a formal retention strategy. Oftentimes we get so focused on why executive directors and staff leave, but really we need to be thinking about what can we do to help them stay, and that's where that retention policy comes in. And of those in the 2026 survey, 70% of current nonprofit paid staff members are considering looking for another job. That's a startling number. And when I dug into that data a little bit more, it was determined that the most at-risk people, the most people that are looking for those new positions, work in the community engagement and outreach sector. So our nonprofits, our Main Street organizations, we cannot afford to not approach staffing from a retention viewpoint. When you consider 83% of your network is considering moving on, that causes some real issues. Retention is important for a variety of reasons. And in my experience, it takes about 3 years for an executive director to really hit their stride. And that's also kind of at that point where the community is really trusting of that person, and they're starting to get pulled in multiple different directions. And that's where that burnout phase starts to hit too. So thinking about keeping in track of what reasons why you would want to retain somebody is, again, it's expensive. It costs money when you're trying to find a new director. It is also at risk to affect your fundraising. When that trust is built, sometimes funders, it's an opportunity for funders or volunteers to take a step back and think, I'm just going to see what happens with this organization before I re-engage. So again, it really does affect that organization for up to 3 years when you have that transition. An executive director position is hard. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it feels like every decision matters when you're an executive director. You're working with small nonprofit or your small businesses that are putting their heart and soul into their business, and sometimes it's their whole livelihood. And even small decisions feel big in situations like that. Directors are beholden to many different types of groups within their community, different stakeholders with lots of competing interests. For example, a property owner wants to have higher rents, the tenant wants lower rents. So it's always that balance of meeting and talking and having those conversations of people with competing interests. And then executive directors, we're doers in the Main Street world. We like to say yes to everything, but you just can't. So again, those are some reasons why it's really kind of tough to be an executive director. When you think about any other career where you have to have a baseline knowledge of 4 completely different things, there aren't very many careers where you have to have that such a broad knowledge. So let's really dig into what we're here for today, is to talk about strategies to retain your directors. This is really an informal process that we have in Iowa. We did a poll of our 53 directors, and we've done it a couple of times now. And again, we're trying not to focus on why people leave, but we're asking our directors, why do you stay? What makes you enjoy the position that you have? And what we found is these responses kind of fell into buckets that line up with the 8 strategies that we are going to talk about today. But at the end of the day, really what you need to think about is, from a board member perspective, it is to get to know your director as a person. Find out what motivates them, and then just do more of that. So the first one kind of seems like a no-brainer, which is to offer that competitive compensation. Find out what other nonprofit organizations in your area are paying their executive directors and paying their staff. A lot of coordinating programs do salary and funding surveys. I know in Iowa we do them every other year, and we poll and find out what's the going rate. So make sure you're in line with those numbers. There's also the living wage calculator, cost of living things. So you can go ahead and look for those online, but really kind of figure out what that base pay needs to be. Make sure that you're budgeting for raises every year, provide benefits when you can, and really help cover the expenses that a director has just to be a director. If they are having to take a council member out to lunch, can you help cover the expense of what that lunch might be rather than have them have to pay for it themselves? So find ways to offer compensation in line with what they would get in other professional capacities. Throughout the presentation, I have quotes from some of our executive directors. As I said, we did this informal poll and they provided information. I won't read all of them to you, but I will give a little bit of a summation. Really, this is just about an executive director who really was contemplating whether she could continue to afford to stay in her role. She was a single mom with 2 young kids, and the board really valued her and found a way to make it work. She knew that there was a plan in place that they were working towards. She knew it wasn't going to happen overnight, but they made it happen for her. So I think that's really important. The next one is that just providing the equipment and resources that you need to do your job. In my experience working with executive directors, when it comes down to those either or budget decisions, the executive director is going to sacrifice something that's going to make their job easier for something that's better for the program overall. But it's your responsibility as the board to provide those tools and resources. So think about questions like, how old is your computer that your director is working from? Do you have heat and air that are working in the office? Okay. How about the Wi-Fi connection? All of those things that make their job easier are things that you need to be asking about. So ask your director what they need, what would make their job easier, and then plan a way to deliver it. I'm going to give a little anecdotal story here. I was in a community in Iowa. We have really cold winters, and I was going up to a community, and the director said, hey, make sure to bring your boots. And I thought, well, yeah, I'm going to bring my boots because it's going to be when we do our walking tour. I got to the office, and he did not have heat in the office. He had a little space heater that was kind of blowing right by where he sat. That is not providing the tools and resources that director needed. He is no longer there. Since then, they've had to move to a different office. But again, make sure that you're providing what your directors need. This quote I think is really interesting. Anything to save me from heat stroke and post-event laryngitis would make my life easier. So what is going to make this guy happy? It's going to be a pop-up tent and a portable mic and a speaker. Not hard to deliver. Again, just have to ask, what do they need? We kind of talked about this earlier, but it's easier to get pulled in multiple directions when you have, competing interests and stakeholders. But part of creating that positive culture is staying true to the organization's mission. We had a community who had an event. They started an event called the Pink Ribbon Run. It was an event for their local Beyond Pink breast cancer awareness group. And this event grew and became a bigger and bigger event. There was no financial benefit to the organization. And over time, it just took up more and more capacity. Basically, it was a fall event. It took up all of fall and part of the summer to pull together this event that became 1,000 runners. And it just became too much for the organization. So what they had to do is they had to figure out a way to turn that event over to the nonprofit that was truly benefiting and be a support partner, but not be the one that is doing that event themselves. So you need to, again, find a way to stay true to your mission. To make things happen. The other thing is you don't want to be totally, have the director be totally dependent on holding all the volunteers accountable for things that they say they're going to do. We know things happen in people's lives, and as a volunteer, your volunteer work is going to be the first thing that you kind of step away from when you have other things that happen in your life. And we understand that when you're in the role of being a director, but it really helps to have chair people and board members who are also part of the process of filling in the gaps when a volunteer volunteer does have to step away. Everything can't fall on that executive director's shoulders. That's just not a positive way to live. This quote, "My board truly shows up, not just in meetings, but in day-to-day work. They step in to volunteer, they support me mentally and physically, and recognize when the workload becomes too much." Won't read the rest of the comments, but again, think about yourself. Are you providing that for your executive director? Are you there to help and support them? Are there other board members who maybe aren't picking up their weight? And what can you do to encourage them to be part of the team and active part of the team? Kind of back to that pink ribbon run example, Main Street programs really don't have to be the ones to do everything downtown, but they do need to create downtown as the center of community activity. So helping manage workloads really helps provide that opportunity. So if you're creating a place where other people want to do things and spending time developing those relationships, that's an important part of helping with that workload. Another thing that I like to talk about is just calendar management. Now we have our calendars on our phone. A lot of our programs share one master Google Calendar, but it is really hard to think of what the actual year looks like when you're so focused on small screens. We encourage our communities to have a big master calendar that is an annual calendar posted right in their boardroom. It's a visible calendar where everyone in the organization, all of the volunteers, can see what's happening, not only from their lens, from their committee or their task force lens, but also how it affects the program overall. And when you can see that, it really helps to be able to spread things out throughout the year. So I really encourage you to think about ways that you might help the whole organization understand what the calendar looks like. Also, the executive directors, they answer to the board, but they should only be one boss overseeing and that direction of what the board wants the director to be doing. When a director is micromanaged by multiple board members, it really does not create a sustainable environment for that director to work in. For me, it's about mutual understanding. Every role has clarity, balance, and appreciation. When we support each other in this way, we create conditions to make a lasting impact. Again, a direct quote from one of our directors. That's what makes her life happy. Directors like to get things done. Supporting those boundaries on your executive director time is really important. It's really making sure that everyone has a stake in the game. If you work in a Main Street world, and you all do, you know that schedules fluctuate greatly, especially for the staff or the director or the paid staff. One day, an executive director might be giving a tour to the governor or the lieutenant governor. The next day, they may be in a parade supporting the event, planting flowers. There's such a variety of things that they do. Nights, weekends, holidays. When we work in this world, we know that that's all part of the gig, what we've signed up for. But how the board reacts to those demands on people's time is really what's the key. So providing comp time and encouraging directors to use it are really important. Allowing that flexibility for them to do other things that happen in their life are really important too. I had one boss who told me, because of the way the schedule was, he's like, you know what, Carol, your hair grows on work time. You can get your hair cut during the workday if that's what you need to do, because you can't do it after work. So just think about ways that you can be flexible. That kind of quote always stuck with me. Flexibility and trust, our support. Flexibility, trust, and support are key for me. Just because I'm not sitting in my office from 9 to 5 doesn't mean I'm not working. I believe being seen and out and about in my community is key to building relationships, and that is 100% true. If your executive director is sitting in their office all the time, they're not doing their job. They need to be out creating those relationships, building that trust, and the board needs to understand and support that. In Iowa, we require our directors to be out on the street. We call it sidewalk time, and we require them to be out for 20% of their time, should be out on the street, getting to know the businesses, in and out of the businesses, getting to know the stakeholders and the partners within their community. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but I do want to dig into it a little bit more. So, as I said, that providing that comp time and that flexible scheduling is one thing, but supporting and encouraging its use is another. Board members need to be that accountability partner to our executive directors and our staff. And to have them really force them to take that time. If the office is closed on a Monday after a big weekend event, it is okay. It is not okay to expect them to come in and have that time, the full day of in the office, without having some ability to compensate for that time that they had. An example that I have, which was a huge red flag for me, I was in a community and when we do our partnership visits, we meet with the executive team separate from the executive director. And we're having this conversation, and the board president said to me, Matt wants to coach his 6-year-old daughter's soccer team. And she goes, I just don't know how he's going to fit it in with everything else that he has to do. That was so wrong on so many levels. Finding a way to allow him to be able to participate in his family's activities. Luckily, we were able to kind of work through that. It was a little bit of a rough patch. That director is still there. The board president did decide that she should step away. So again, you really need to be focused on and thinking about how you can support your directors with that crazy schedule that they have, and how can you not only encourage and provide, but have that expectation that they take advantage of that flexible time. I really love the organizations that have a communication policy where it identifies when it's appropriate to contact your executive director and when they can expect responses. So when we're working with volunteers, oftentimes they're working at the off hours. Directors, we understand that. But setting that expectation that maybe you're not going to get that response at 10 o'clock at night, maybe the response isn't going to come. They can shut off that part of their phone and their world, and you're going to get your response during working hours, and set that expectation. Of course, obviously, unless it's an emergency, but again, having that policy in place that all board members understand and know when to allow those boundaries is really, really important. We had one director who they had a childcare situation come up, and their board worked with them to figure out a way to allow them to maintain their job and still do what they needed to do for their family. Again, so case by case basis, supporting those directors. So think about the policies and procedures that you have in place in your organization. Again, do the office hours allow for flexibility, but still maintain that level of professionalism and dependableness that stakeholders can count on? Maybe there's set hours that always on Wednesday and Thursday from noon to 2, that someone's going to be in the office, but then allow that flexibility outside of that are ways to make that happen. I think another thing that seems obvious is to recognize and thank employees for their work, but it isn't always top of mind for program volunteers when they're in that leadership role. Executive directors are usually the ones that are saying thanks to the board and thanks to the volunteers and creating that thankful environment. But I encourage you to be mindful and be sincere and genuine when you're giving thanks. Find out what makes that director tick and give them more of that. When I was an executive director, we had a board member, a board president at the time came in. It was a Friday, mid-morning, and she said, "Hey, you know what? We're going to close the office today. You guys have been working hard. Go home. It's a bonus day off. Don't worry about it." Of course, we were all like, "Oh, we have so many things to do that we were going to get done today." But she's like, "No," and she stayed and she said, "Go home. Do something for yourself today." So find ways to support your directors and thank them, and do it publicly as well. So if you're at an annual meeting and you're the board president and you're talking to the group and sharing, the accomplishments, make sure to also publicly thank that director for all that they did to help make things happen as well. I like this quote. The little things throughout the little thoughtful things go a long way, like a board member dropping off my favorite coffee when it's time for a grant deadline, or showing up to help to do less glamorous work like tearing down tents and emptying trash cans. So again, it's those little things that add up. In one of my communities, we had the executive director had turned in his resignation. We do an exit interview, and I was visiting with him, and he said his kind of that last straw for him was it was after a big event, and they had worked all day, and he was picking up trash at the end of the night, and some of the board members, he specifically said two board members walked past, and they just kind of ignored him because they didn't want to get sucked into helping. And he said, they didn't talk to me, they didn't say thank you, they didn't acknowledge. And he said that was the straw for me. I just couldn't do it anymore. So again, it's the little things that add up. Maybe they couldn't stay, but they could have just said, "Hey, good job today. Thanks for everything you did. We'll see you tomorrow." Something like that is really important. And kind of number 8, the last one, finally, is to kind of think about providing the tools and resources that we talked about earlier, is also that training and education for your executive director. So a director who has been properly onboarded, has given the opportunity to develop their skills, is more likely to be confident in their role. And if they're confident, they're more likely to stay longer. So providing those opportunities through Main Street America's Academy, through the training that your states provide, going to the national conference, all of those opportunities are important to help develop your director and help them grow professionally. Again, that's a value that a lot of our directors have. So key takeaways: fair compensation, resources and equipment for directors to do their job, that positive culture, have fun, enjoy your time together. That's really important. That manageable workload, and also allowing that work-life balance and expecting work-life balance is important. Flexibility ties into that as well. And again, that thanking and recognizing your volunteers. Professional growth too. So those are the 8 takeaways that we had from our informal survey with our executive directors. Again, those buckets, we have done this this survey a couple times, and they seem to continually fall into those areas. So I encourage you all to think about how you might apply some of those within your community. To summarize the quote from this experience, tenured executive director, we call her. She's been around for about 18 years. It's really when you have that working board, when you have people willing to help and everybody rolls up their sleeves and do that mission-based work, it really does make it easier to stay. So providing that support is really important. So helping our downtowns, transforming them to become something that we are striving for, is really something that we can all relate to. So with that, we're going to go ahead and open things up to questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen if I can get up to.
Before you stop
Yeah.
sharing, could you go back to the key takeaway slide real quick?
Sure. Yeah, I sure can do that.
Someone had asked to put those in the chat, so I was just going to type them up real quick.
Okay.
And we can start questions now too if you want.
Sure. You just tell me when I should stop sharing. How about that?
Okay, I'll let you know. Thank you.
Okay. And because of the way the screens are, I can't see anybody at this point until I stop sharing. So I'm going to rely on you to help me with questions.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions for Carol? I do. This is Tasha with College Park.
Hi, Tasha.
Hi. So our Main Street admin is a little different.
Okay.
Our executive director works under the city
Okay.
and works more in cooperation and collaboration with our board.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the things that you mentioned are already taken care of because the role has been pulled in under the city. But work-life balance and that working board part is very key. What I've observed is, I guess, because our city is allowed to appoint its board officers, that can change. And so you can get people who the prior board were great. They understood the working board mission and the mission-based work. And then you can get a board where they're not so much. And so it's a very thin line that we're balancing to make sure that the Main Street manager, which is what we call ours, get
Mhm.
the bulk of those things. So how do we broach that if you've maybe say got a board that's not as confident in doing the mission based work for whatever reason?
Yeah, I think really it comes down to the training and having them understand what the approach is and how it works. And I think one thing Georgia does, which actually we may take and steal too, is just providing that board training. Like, this is obviously directed towards boards, and that accountability to have them watch and understand, I think is one way to do that. The other thing you could do is when you think about who's doing the appointing, so who is appointing the board members, if they understand what they are appointing the person to do, they're going to find a person that maybe matches the expectations a little bit, and setting those expectations. Also, having a board commitment form that board members have to sign every year to outlay what their responsibilities are, to become that working board member, the time that they need to devote to the role as a board member is important, because then that gives them an opportunity to reflect and say, maybe this board isn't right for me if this is what the expectations are, and would allow them to kind of move on and choose another way to volunteer in a different capacity in their community. So those are just a couple things that I can think of that might be helpful.
Okay, thank you very much.
Also, Tasha, one of the reasons why we asked Carol if we could record this session is so it would be on our YouTube page. As you know, board members are required to have at least 2 hours of training every year in Georgia. So
Yes.
some of our executive directors have decided as an easy way for the board members to get that 2 hours of training is that at the end of every meeting or at the beginning of every meeting, they'll show like a 30-minute training or an hour training. And so that would be this session is going to run about, a half of an hour. So you could just tell your board members, hey, you've got to have 2 hours of training. We're about to have 30 minutes of training right now before our board meeting, and show this presentation to them.
That's a great idea.
Carol,
Yeah,
you can
because a
stop
lot
sharing
of
your screen if
times,
you'd like.
hold on. I'm sorry. A lot of
Okay.
times, what we get is that the information that's being discussed during the board meetings gets drawn out, and it kind of steers away from the mission of those monthly board meetings. So I think showing like a quick 30-minute training or 15, 20-minute training would be helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Another thing I've just recently heard from one of our Main Street managers is her office got moved from downtown to an office in City Hall, which is outside of the downtown district. And her direct supervisor wanted her in the office at all times. Also didn't provide her a cell phone. She was having to use her own personal cell phone. And I thought, the compromise, if you're worried that somebody's not doing their job, you could give them a cell phone so that when they're downtown walking the streets, or as you call it, Carol, sidewalk time, building those relationships with business owners, they would always be available, to communicate with the cell phone. But yet they didn't even provide her a cell phone, just expected her to sit in the office from 9 to 5 every day.
Yeah, that ties right back into that tools and resources.
I have a question that I can put back on some of the board members that are listening, maybe put y'all on the spot a little bit and just ask, what is one thing that y'all do that helps support your director? Maybe something unique that could give an idea to another community who's trying to get a little more creative with supporting their director. And if we don't get any volunteers, I'll just pick someone.
I'll volunteer.
I was just about to volunteer you, Dylan. Great.
I had a feeling. So Maggie's our director. She's fantastic. But there's sometimes there are difficult asks of her, or maybe she doesn't feel comfortable asking the city manager or the mayor or somebody in the city council for help with a certain project or funding. And she's allowed me, we always communicate before, but she's allowed me the opportunity to help facilitate some of those conversations. That way she can allocate her time and energy to her normal Main Street goals, and then me or some of my fellow board members, we could have a conversation to be able to help her do a better job. So just kind of like lessening her workload, because she wears a lot of hats. So that's
Yeah.
one small example.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think, directors can help, or managers can help identify maybe some talking points. And then if having that great relationship with you allows her to say, they need to hear this from you, from a stakeholder, from this viewpoint. And these are my trouble points. So excellent idea. I think that sounds like a great thing I might need to add to my presentation for next time. Thanks for
Thank you.
sharing.
Does anyone else have anything?
And we want to say thanks to Kitty for joining us today. She's the coordinating program director in Kentucky.
Hi, Kitty.
Oh, you're muted.
I was, yes. So thank you for letting me join, because, it's always good for us to network and see what's going on, and making sure that as our state coordinator network, we're kind of providing the same information. And so, like many of you, we all have we all have the same challenges. And so it's always fun to see how someone else is meeting those. Plus, I only get to see these people, a couple times a year. So this is good. So thank you for letting me join.
Well, I'm just going to say something too to the directors and the people on this call. We, as a coordinating staff in Iowa, have looked to Georgia often for ideas, and same with you, Kentucky. We are always looking for ideas, and I just want to say you have a great program in Georgia. So congrats and hats off to the team there. You guys are doing a great work.
Absolutely. We steal everything we can from Georgia and Iowa and other places because we don't have staff. So it's nice
Yeah,
to.
Kitty, you're like a one-woman show, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
So, I'm a one-woman show with friends. How's that?
Anybody else have any questions or want to share with us something cool that you do for your executive directors?
Or something that you're going to take away from this to implement or bring up at your next board meeting?
I'm Terry from Greensboro, Georgia, and I really like the idea of having a board commitment form and also training at the board meetings. This class right here every board member should have to see.
Yeah, I agree. And I had written down that as well, Terry, about the board member commitment form, because I don't know how many of our Main Streets have implemented those board commitment forms. I think that's a great idea. I've joined boards where I wasn't 100% what was expected out of me. So I would really appreciate having that spelled out from the get-go so that I could say, you know what, I don't think I have the time to commit to this right now.
I agree.
I think doing it annually, even though terms are longer than that, gives people a chance to reflect, because it's better for their personal life, again, their work-life balance, to have that opportunity, and it's better for the organization too.
Carol, do you have some samples of those that you could send to us?
Yep, will do.
Okay, thanks.
Carol also mentioned to us earlier that she has a hiring guide that she's going to share with us for whenever a community does experience some turnover in their director position. So we'll add that to our resource library on the website to be a helpful tool for whenever, if your community does experience some turnover for the director. Well, okay, I guess if there's not any more questions, Sheree, we can go ahead and stop the recording and finish this up. And I do just want to thank everybody again for tuning in to this training. I hope it was beneficial. It was beneficial for us, and hopefully you all left with something that you can take back to your communities and continue to be a good support system for your directors. And I hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Carol, did you let Kitty know we were doing this, or maybe she just saw it
No.
in the newsletter? Okay.